Good morning slash afternoon, depending what time you're doing this worksheet today. We're going to take a look at properties of parallelograms on today's asynchronous day. So what I'd like you to do is follow along with me either on a separate sheet of paper or go ahead and print this one out for yourself. So go ahead and put your name on it, Mr. Z. All right. And then today is the 30th, so we're going to go through and do properties of parallelograms today. Okay, so there's 6 properties that you're going to need to know. And we are going to have a little properties quiz at some point along the way here. So I'll be kind of working with you this week on this. All right, so parallelograms have 6 features on them that we want to keep in mind here. Okay, the first one is that opposite sides are congruent. All right. So a parallelogram, key thing there, right, is the second one, which is not only the opposite sides congruent, keyword parallelogram, those opposite sides are also parallel to each other, okay? So opposite sides are parallel, and they're also congruent to each other, okay? Now there's another one here that the angles, so the angles that are across from one another, okay, are also going to be congruent. So opposite angles are congruent. Okay, and because we have parallel lines, these angles that are right next to each other are same side interior, and they are supplementary. So we're going to say consecutive. Sometimes you might also replace consecutive with the word adjacent. Angles are supplementary. Okay. So opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary. And the other one that is going on here is that if you connect the lines going from corner to corner, these lines are called the diagonals. These lines are going to cut each other in half. Okay, they're going to bisect each other. All right, so the diagonals bisect each other. Now, when you combine the first and second one together, right? One way to show or to know that something's a parallelogram is just to get these two sides that are across from each other to be both parallel and congruent. And if you can do that, that'll also force these two sides to be parallel and congruent. So number 6, okay, which is normally when you might see a video or anything else, you might see 5. But the 6th one is a combination of these first two, which is one pair of sides, okay, is congruent or are congruent and parallel. All right, so what we're going to do for the rest of this is we are going to create equations and solve and then list the property from these 6 that we're using, okay, as to how you would do the question. So in the first one, all right, we know we have a parallelogram ABCD. Now we're going to draw a picture, and the way we label this parallelogram is we always just pick a corner and then we go kind of around counterclockwise here. So if we want to say this is A, then we would go kind of around in the circle here and say B, C, or no, it's not going to be B, C, D. We're not going to bounce back and forth. So it's not going to be C, D like this, okay? Because that's not going around in a circle. So what you're going to do is put down C next and then D, okay? So it says, and now we can kind of label our figure that BC is 9y plus 10, okay? AD is 6y plus 40, and AB is 1/2 y plus 50. So the property we're going to use is that these opposite sides, so we're talking about the sides, we know that they're congruent, and parallel doesn't really help because that would get us angle measures. So we're just going to use here the fact that the opposite sides, okay, are congruent. And so the sides we know that are across each other are AD and BC, and so we're going to make that equation that 6y plus 40 is equal to 9y plus 10. All right, so go ahead and finish this out and then see if you can figure out what all the side lengths are. Pause it now, give it a shot. All right, and hopefully you guys ended up with sides of 155. So if we want to watch the replay here real quick, okay, we know we are going to fill all this lovely stuff in. So we have our equation. We're going to move the 6y over to both sides, okay? Move the 10 over. So we're going to get 30 is equal to 3y, and then y is equal to 10. And so when you plug in from here, 6 times 10 plus 40 is 100. BC automatically has to be the same thing, so it's also 100, but you can plug in just to check and make sure you're right. And then AB, if you plug in, is going to give you 55, and DC has to be the same thing because they're congruent. Opposite sides are congruent, and we're good to go. Okay. All right. Number 2, same type of thing here. So we can draw ourselves a picture. So let's put A over here this time. We're going to go around in our circle. So here's B, C, and D. So we know that angle A is 2x plus 13. Okay. And angle C is 3x minus 16. So these angles are across one another. So our property we're going to use here is that opposite angles are congruent. And then we're going to go ahead and make our equation. So we can do 2x plus 13 is equal to 3x minus 16. Get the x's on the same side first. Okay. And then we can move that 16 over to get that. So the x's on by themselves, numbers on the other side, undo the addition subtraction first. Okay. So we're going to get 29 is equal to x. And then that's it. We just have to find x. So we're good to go. Now you could plug in to check, like 2 times 29 plus 13, 3 times 29 minus 16, and make sure they're the same. Leave it up to you guys. All right. Going on to number 3, same type of question. We just have different expressions. So once again, we know that we're going to use opposite angles are congruent. All right, go ahead and try this one on your own here. All right, so we start with our equation where angle A, 4x minus 60 is equal to angle C. All right, we are going to add x to both sides to get the x's on the same side, and then add the 60 over as well to get undo the distance subtraction. We get 5x is equal to 90, divide by 5, and we should get 18 for x. So hopefully you guys end up with the same thing. All right, number 4, measure of one angle of a parallelogram is 24 degrees measure than the second angle of the same parallelogram. Now, if these are angles in our parallelogram, okay, if one of the angles we'll say is x, this angle over here across the way, the opposite angles have to be congruent, so this will also be x. And then the angle that's next to it, okay, or adjacent to it would be x plus 24, and this angle would be the same. So there's 2 ways that we can do this, okay? We can use the fact that the angles that are on the same side of the parallelogram here are consecutive, and remember that those 2 angles have to add to 180. We also can use the fact that these 4 angles in this figure are going to add to 360, so it's up to you. We'll use the consecutive angles since we talked about that as one of the properties. So consecutive angles add to 180, or are supplementary, it's up to you. And then we're going to do x plus 24 equals 180 degrees. Okay, so combined like terms, we're going to get 2x plus 24 is equal to 180. We'll undo the addition and subtraction first to get x by itself. And then we get the move that 2 away, divide out to get the opposite here, and we're going to get x is equal to, I believe this is 78 degrees. And then we could easily check it by plugging in and seeing if one angle is 78, then the other angle, 78 plus 24, is equal to 102, and these two angles add to 180, so it does check. All right. The acute angle, okay, we want to make sure we answer the question of the parallelogram. So the acute angle is 78 degrees. 102 would be considered the obtuse angle. All right, in number 5, we have a parallelogram. It's the diagonals that are intersecting. All right, so remember, we know that the diagonals bisect each other. Now, key thing here is that if we label this, once again, A, B, C, and D, okay, when AC and BD cross, okay, and they meet at E, that these are not equal to each other. So AC is not the same as BD. And that's because when you have, if these were straight up and down like a rectangle, these would be the same. But as soon as I make them kind of lean over, it automatically forces these 2 points to be closer than these two. Okay, so keep that in mind. What does happen though is that they cut each other in half. So you can see how it says AE is congruent to EC, and that's what they give us here. So we know that 4x minus 3 is equal to 17 minus x. And then same thing, we're going to add the x over to both sides. Okay, then we'll add the 3 to get undo the addition subtraction here. So we're going to get 5x is equal to 20, and then we divide by 5, and we get x is equal to 4. Now for these questions, make sure you check to see what you're supposed to find. Do you just need to find x, or are you supposed to find the length of the diagonal or the parts of the diagonal? So just double check. All right, let's see if you guys can try number 6. All right, so the key thing that we want to remember is write down our property. So the property we're going to use here is that the diagonals bisect each other. So that tells us that, first of all, DE is equal to EC. Okay, why don't you keep going up there? Down here. Oh man. All right, and move my cursor down, then hopefully fix this issue. All right, nope, it will not. Okay, and that E, DE, and EB are also the same here. Okay, so what we're going to do is set up our equation. So we're going to get 4x minus 5 is equal to 31. Okay, remember these are what we're trying to find. We're going to find x. So even though we know these are 27, we're really paying attention to AE and EC here. Okay, add the 5 to both sides to get the x by itself. So undo that addition subtraction first. 4x equals 36, and then get rid of that 4 to get x by itself, and we should get x is equal to 9. Okay, which of these statements is always true? So which of these properties are true? The diagonals of a parallelogram are congruent, perpendicular, bisect the angles, or bisect each other. What do you think? And hopefully you thought to yourself that choice D was the answer, because that is correct. They're not congruent, they're not perpendicular, they do not bisect the angles. These are other shapes we'll talk about a little bit later. And number 8 here, the last question, okay? I should say number 9 is the last question. So number 8, the perimeter of a parallelogram is 100. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and draw, that's a terrible looking parallelogram, by the way. That's a little bit better. Okay, so we'll start from here, A, and then we're going to go around counterclockwise here. So B, C, D. So it says if AB is bigger than AD, okay, and the perimeter is 100. Now, if you remember, the property we're going to use here is that the opposite sides are congruent. Okay, that perimeter means we're going to add all the sides together. Okay, so if we were to choose, let's say for instance, 50. Now, if AB is bigger than AD and I make this 50, okay, then automatically DC has to be the same thing and has to be 50. But if the perimeter, when I add all the sides, is 100, there's no way for that to happen because now there's nothing left for these two sides. So that can't be true. Okay? All right, now, let's say we go the opposite end, we choose 20. Now, if A, then I'm choosing AB. So if AB, okay, is 20, that forces this to be 20. Now I've used 40, so if I take 100 and subtract 40 for these two sides, that leaves me with 60, right? And then that means these two sides are 30 and 30, which seems like it would work, except remember that AB has to be bigger than AD, and here AD is bigger. So that isn't true. So like that one's out. And we know that one's out. Okay? So what about 25, right? That means we choose 25. So if we choose 25 and 25, that's 50. So that means we have 50 left over, which means these all have to be 25, but that's still not true, right? So our answer has to be C, 45. So if this is 45 and this is 45, I've used 90 of my 100. So by subtracting, we'll get left 10, and that means BC and AD would have to be 5, which is possible. So choice C would be the correct answer. And the key thing is that AB has to be bigger than AD, okay? So that's what rules out B and A, and D is not possible because I only have a perimeter of 100. All right, last question here, question 9. If quadrilateral ABCD is a parallelogram, which statement is always true? Show are the diagonals congruent, perpendicular, bisect each other, or bisect the angles. And welcome back to question number 7, where we want to choose choice C. All right, guys, that is it for today. Hopefully you had a great one. Have a great rest of the day, and I will see you all tomorrow.